Hi everyone, and welcome to the AGU AGI Heads and Chairs webinar and discussion series. My name is Delaney Robinson. I'm the Continuing Education Specialist here at AGI, and I'll be sitting in for Christopher Keene today, co-moderating this event with Pranoti Asher, who is the Assistant Director of Grants and Education Programs at AGU. Also in the background, we have Leila Gonzalez from AGI, who's helping coordinate the production side for today's webinar. And now I'll turn it over to Pranoti.
All right, thanks, Delaney. Welcome, everybody. I'm very excited to have our distinguished speaker today, Aley El-Shazly from Marshall University, who's going to be talking today about how he and his colleagues at Marshall University went from doing a lot of curricular revisions and what they learned from it and what was successful and what didn't work and why it may not have worked. And he is not only looking for advice, but is also looking to hear from those of you who have gone through a similar process. So today's webinar is a continuation of the conversations we've been having about the vision and changes in the geosciences. And we have talked about various aspects of this. And so today we want to focus our attention on all kinds of things that you can do with your curriculum to make your programs, make your courses, make your department, a place where students can belong in the geosciences. So with that, Aley, take it away, please.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks for this introduction. I'm really happy to be here. And what I would like to do is just briefly introduce what Marshall is all about, what Marshall Geology Department is all about, give you some information about that, and then the driving force behind carrying out some curricular changes, how we implemented those changes, and then some of the results, successes and failures, and then open it up for a discussion. And I'm really looking for and very excited about having some feedback. So Marshall University is basically, it's located in Huntington in West Virginia. It serves the tri-state area of West Virginia, Kentucky, and Ohio. In 2019, it made it into got the designation of an R2 institution. Has a total enrollment of approximately 12,000 students, give or take, about 9,000, and currently 8,000 and something undergraduates, 10% of which are minority students, and 70% of which are described as being first-generation students. The Geology Department, we offer a Bachelor of Science in Geology with two areas of emphasis in environmental geology and engineering geology. We also offer a Bachelor of Arts in Earth Sciences, which is really some kind of an umbrella. It does have some geology courses, but it also includes meteorology, geography, and so on. And it's designed to really just bring in perhaps some more people interested in earth science and maybe giving them a flavor of that while not being extremely rigorous and very demanding, especially in terms of chemistry, physics, and math. We did offer a master's in physical science with a geology conversation as part of the umbrella that we have in our college. But that has been suspended since 2015 because of staffing issues. So we're essentially a department of 4 tenure track faculty. It's been that way for 30-something years or even longer. And so we offer our upper division classes on a rotating basis every other year. Currently, we're facing real challenges because we're down to only 2 tenure track faculty and one one-year term appointment. So it's really pretty challenging at the moment. For a department this size, we actually have excellent teaching and research facilities. I mean, among our research facilities, we have a brand new field emission gun scanning electron microscope, an ICP-AES, excellent equipment, excellent field equipment, fantastic samples to work on, an excellent lab for engineering geologists, for engineering geology, also brand new. So compared to many other places, and I have been to many other places, we're very, very well equipped for our size. Our number of majors has hovered between 18 and 33 over the past 17 years. So, you know, we've had some flows and some ebbs. I think it's normal. You graduate a large cohort, you expect to go through a low of some sort. You recruit a few more students and you're back at a larger number and so on. In terms of the number of students that we've been graduating every year, again, they've fluctuated, but in recent years, we've managed to stabilize that at right around about 7 or 8 per year. So, you know, overall, I think for our size, I think these numbers are okay. We have, as far as our curriculum, whether the one that was pre-2015 or after the curricular revisions, I would say we have a good balance between the applied and basic science classes. We do cover the core concepts, at least 6 of them, in a fairly well explained manner. We can actually discuss that and go into perhaps the 2 that I feel require a little bit more attention on our part. We require all of our graduates to have a capstone, and the capstone can be fulfilled by either an internship with some of the local companies or research with one of the faculty members, or attending a field camp at another school, a summer field camp at another school. We consider our program to be fairly rigorous. Certainly our graduates perform very well when they go to grad school. The vibes that we're getting are fantastic, whether from their employers or from the alumni themselves when they mention how well prepared they felt. And as far as graduation rates or employment rates of our graduates, they're not bad at all. So I'd like to go through that. And between 2011 and 2016, if you actually remove the 12% that were unknown what their fates were, we actually had about 90% employed in the field, 90% of the graduates employed in the field or attending a decent graduate program. So I felt that that was a pretty good situation. Our present day situation has changed a little bit, but not much. Again, if you actually remove the 8% that we don't know much about, overall employment is about 82% employed in the field. The only thing that really has changed that much is in the last 5 years, the graduates of the last 5 years, no one seems to have gone into grad school, unlike the previous situation. There is a trend of more of our graduates having employment outside of earth sciences, and some of them actually starting out with a position in geology and then moving into either upper administration or marketing or something like that within their same company and kind of leaving the technical aspects and the field of geology. So those are the trends. But in general, I think these numbers are not bad at all. I should mention that most of those are employed locally within the tri-state area. Some of them, again, move to other states and, again, seem to be doing quite well. So let's start with what our curriculum actually looked like. So before 2015, we had the typical core courses, introductory classes, field mapping and structural geology, mineralogy, stratigraphy and sedimentation, and then either petrology or sedimentary petrography. So petrology would be igneous and metamorphic, and sedimentary petrography would be, sedimentary rocks. Computer methods in geology and geomorphology and a capstone. Those were our core classes. And then we allowed our majors to have 11 hours among a number of classes. We have so many different electives and only 11 hours to choose from. And among those electives, there was even an elective in environmental geography. So one taken outside of our department. That's what we allowed for. And so among these, we had, some classes that were fairly popular, like fossil fuels. Most of the students would actually sign up for that one. Hydrogeology, very important class. Environmental geology, very, very popular among our graduates and so on. And others that were not so popular and were not very well attended. In addition, our majors had to fulfill the college requirements of math, a chemistry sequence, and either a physics sequence or taking physics 1 and biology 1. So that was the story behind, before 2015. Within that, we felt like we covered the core concepts fairly well. I think the situation has not changed that much. One could argue that the last two disciplines, natural resources and climate change, and especially nowadays, probably required more attention from us, and we should probably revisit that issue and try to do better there. And in terms of assessing the skills that our students develop, we focus on oral and written communication, math and computer skills, geologic problem solving, and basic knowledge. And we would figure these out mostly, we would have different benchmarks at different stages throughout the students' progress in their, sophomore, junior, and senior years. But mostly the main benchmark has been the capstone, especially when it comes to figuring out how well they do with the oral communication and the technical writing. And we feel that they've been achieved to a large extent. So it was not that bad. So what was the driving force then behind going through some curricular changes? We had two introductory level classes, one called General Geology, Geology 110, and the other one, Physical Geology, and they overlapped by more than 80%. That allowed students to double dip, to actually take one class and then go ahead and take the other, even though when we told them outright, you're wasting your time and your money, you've had that material before, there was nothing we could do about it. Not that we had too many that would actually double dip, but it was, I think, a problem. And the other thing is the general geology, the enrollment in the general geology classes was actually undergoing a downturn. There were fewer and fewer students enrolling in that class, semester in, semester out. And we felt that maybe we're not doing enough with our introductory level classes. Notice that our introductory level classes are our bread and butter. They're the only way or the main way for us to actually recruit into the discipline. Very often we end up recruiting like juniors. They all of a sudden take one of our classes and then decide, okay, to switch majors. So these are the main pipeline. Our other driving force was low enrollments in upper division classes. When you offer so many electives and the students only need 11 hours, and one of the electives is even from outside of the department, you will end up with very low enrollment in some of the electives, especially the ones that are perceived to be fairly challenging. Hydrogeology, geochemistry in particular, and we ended up with very low enrollments. That geophysics, again. In fact, there were times when geophysics we had to actually not offer it because not much demand for it. And that actually rang an alarming bell with the administration, with the college. They didn't really like these low enrollments. So we felt that we had to do something about it. And this was the situation. If you look at the green lines there, they represent the junior senior enrollment, and their numbers, the total enrollment per year, the numbers never even made it to 30. and they were on a decline. And that was certainly a very alarming situation. So we needed to do something about it. And then at that point in time, I was chair, and I received the invitation to attend the Heads and Chairs meeting in January 2016, and that was really an eye-opener. We were already in the middle of discussions about how to perform some curricular changes. Our curriculum had not changed for a long time. We had only introduced some changes here and there, for one particular class, maybe divorcing the lab from the class, allowing students to not register for both, something like that, but not much in terms of changes. The other motivating factor was we had a change of guard. We had a faculty member that actually retired, and we had a young assistant professor that was hired, and we felt, again, maybe this was time to take advantage of what those strong points that faculty had. So all of these were the motivating factors. So how we got about carrying out those changes? We did not really have enough time to go through a matrix approach, lay out all of the skills that we needed, and do the scaffolding the way it was supposed to. And instead, we just focused on, okay, what are our major problems? How do we actually address them? So number one, okay, we're going to do away with the general geology since it overlaps with physical geology. They're almost the same. I mean, the main difference between those two classes was one involved 1 week of historical geology, while the other had, during that week, you would cover groundwater and maybe some glaciers, something like that. Other than that, they were very, very similar. So we decided to replace the general geology with a class on geologic hazards and earth resources. And I must admit that part of the motivation for that came from attending the meeting in January 2016 and talking to many chairs. And a lot of them suggested that, that class actually draws people into the discipline. And we felt that that would be great. Also, the attempt was to make this into this particular class to be taught with a flipped classroom approach, where the students would engage in discussions and so on. PowerPoints would be there. They would go through the material before coming to class. Again, we can discuss that at a later time, because as you will see, it was maybe perhaps wishful thinking on our part. The other changes that we made, we placed hydrogeology and engineering geology in the core instead of geomorphology and computer methods. We then canceled computer methods altogether. And one of the main other changes was we replaced the chemistry 2 and its lab by geochemistry and lab techniques in geology and environmental science. Both of those classes are taught by us in geology, whereas of course the chemistry is taught by chemists. We did exactly the same thing when it came to geophysics, replacing physics 2, and paleontology, replacing biology 1. We then changed field methods from 2 credit hours to 3 credit hours, and I'll go through the reasons behind that in a second as we discuss the situation of the computer methods. And finally, we introduced a new elective, tectonics. It was done in consultation with the new faculty member, trying to kind of gauge, okay, what would that faculty member be more comfortable with instead of the computer methods? That was kind of the approach or the rationale behind it. In order to attract it, because this was an elective class, and to attract majors into it, we made that class a writing intensive class. And we felt that that way it will actually fly and would fill up rather easily. So let's discuss a little bit, let's talk a little bit about the status of computer methods. In attending the meeting in January 2016, it became very, very obvious that, dealing with big data and quantitative methods was really very, very important. And I felt kind of a little bit uneasy canceling computer methods, but at the same time, It was not a very popular, it was a core class. Students complained a lot about it. They felt like it had, it was in part geostatistics, in part some GIS, and sort of they didn't feel very good about it. So we actually went through carefully all of the topics there and tried to assign as many of them to other classes. So in doing so, a lot of the statistics went into lab techniques in geology and environmental science. Some topics went into strat-sed or structural geology, and then the GIS component, the GIS lab part, went into field methods. There were several labs and topics that basically did not have a home and just ended up not being included. So with that, this is actually the present day status of our curriculum. A lot more hours in the core, fewer classes to choose from. You still needed, the students still needed 11 hours of electives, but from fewer classes to choose from. Some of these classes already were very, very popular, like geomorphology or environmental geology, so and fossil fuels. So we're almost certain that those classes would fly no matter what. And indeed, that turned out to be the case. So so with these curricular changes, once we started implementing them, we actually polled the students in the spring of 2017, and the responses were, we received 11 responses, and the responses were mostly that they considered the curriculum to be too harsh, too difficult. They were not very excited about being forced to take both petrology classes. We had made both of them among the core classes at that point in time. They weren't exactly sure why computer methods was eliminated, not that they really missed that part that much, so maybe there was not much communication between us. But they really appreciated the fact that geochemistry and the lab techniques would replace the Chem 2 and its lab, and that geophysics would replace physics 2. That part they really liked that much, and as well as the fact that paleontology would replace biology. That they really appreciated. So with so much reluctance to having the two petrology classes in the core, we as faculty members kind of gave in, and we had them choose among those two classes, and that's where the status exists today. So I'd like now to sort of go over what the overall results are and effects of these curricular changes, what effects they've had on enrollment. And I'm going to start with the introductory classes. And I want you to focus really on the orange and dark blue lines because they represent the physical geology and the general geology. General geology was already undergoing a decline. Okay, as I mentioned, that's Geology 110, and this is from 2011 to 2016, so that's prior to carrying out the changes. But notice that the numbers that we had in each class, you know, at least we had like 50 in each section, something like that. So together they would give us at least a comfortable 100. They were hitting the 100 student mark per semester in terms of enrollment. This is the situation after the implementing the changes. And this time I'd like you to focus on the pale blue, which represents our physical geology class, all right? Along with the dark blue color, which represents the Geology 100. And if you look at the numbers there, they are really very alarming. First of all, they are undergoing a decline. The geologic hazards and earth resources class that we introduced never even made it to 50 students being enrolled. And right now we're looking at, you know, if we get 20, we're kind of lucky. Very alarming. And it's actually not increasing. What is also affecting us is look at our bread and butter, the physical geology class. The physical geology class went down. It used to be almost close to 100, and it's actually been declining. okay, to not even making 50 per semester. So very, very alarming. Nevertheless, if you look at the total trends of total enrollments, okay, for introductory level classes, we managed to really bring things up. So the question is, how did we bring things up? And does that have anything to do with a decline in Geology 100 and Geology 200, our two bread and butter type of classes? And the answer is yes. At the same time that we made these changes, we reintroduced oceanography, introductory oceanography. And introductory oceanography, not only was it reintroduced, even though it's not really part of our curriculum, just introduced as a service class, it was also introduced online and given a Core 2 designation. So as a result, all of the students are flocking into that class. Our numbers are looking, all of a sudden, overall, their numbers are looking good, fairly good. We're not up there to the level that we had reached at one time, getting close to 350, but we're climbing steadily in that direction. But at the same time, our main classes that we use to recruit majors, the physical geology, and we were hoping geologic hazards and class, are actually getting very low enrollments. What about the effects on upper division classes? Now, this was the situation with the green line. This was the situation we never really were making 30, the head count was never really up to 30. It was less than 30 per year enrollment in upper division classes. And if you look at it, the minimum seems to be right around 50 or so, and even hitting 100 in some of these. So definitely we've improved our enrollment in the upper division classes, which makes sense. I mean, we forced them into that. I should point out that all of these changes are happening while overall enrollment at Marshall University over the last 11 years has been undergoing, unfortunately, a bit of a decline. Some maybe perhaps some leveling off over a number of years and then hit hard by COVID and its effects. So overall, in terms of our SCH numbers, and this is what administrators really like to see, well, we're climbing back up. We're seemingly doing okay, but as faculty in the department, we're really concerned. What about our introductory classes? So if I were to recap things, I would say that the advantages of the changes that we made, and they were, I have to admit, they were kind of rushed. They were not the approach, the optimum approach of laying out a grid and a matrix effect and so on. No, but we got better enrollment in our upper division classes. The students really like the idea of having to do chemistry, the geochemistry and the geophysics and the paleontology in our department instead of chemistry and physics. Classes like hydrogeology and engineering geology now are moved into the core. I think they're helping our majors find employment, especially in our area. So I think in effect, this is something that has stabilized the discipline overall. Our biggest problems is low enrollment in Geology 100, and not just that, but we were unable to, not a single student was recruited from this geologic hazards class. There is a drop in enrollment in the physical geology, coupled with an overall decline in the number of majors that we're seeing right now, although that, again, could be just a normal dip. And we're hoping that it will reverse itself, but certainly we're worried when the enrollments in our bread and butter classes, our introductory classes are declining. How are we going to recruit? That's a big question. The question of whether we'd have the two petrology classes in the core or not, that took quite a bit of discussion and so on, and that might be something that I would like to open up for discussion later. The perception that the curriculum is too harsh, too many hours. Basically, in some semesters, students have to take too many geology classes. And that was the idea, your classes are a little bit on the hard side. We really don't hardly have any time for ourselves, that kind of complaint, although we as faculty members coordinated amongst ourselves to make sure that we don't overdo it with the students, that they're not overworked in a particular week. It's a give and take type and a bit of a balance between the different classes. Biggest problem that, in my opinion, is really the online introductory classes. Now, whereas they really improve your overall SCHs, and the administration looks very kindly upon that, I think that they are really taking away from enrollment in our introductory level classes. And I'd really appreciate some of your comments on that and your own experiences. Other problems that were discussed in the 2016 Heads and Chairs meeting, as the issue was brought up, should we replace Chem 2 by geochemistry? And if we do so, the students are not going to be able to join decent graduate programs. I don't see this as a problem at all. Out of experience, the good students that are actually pursuing a graduate program, they're going to find time to also take chemistry too. And it actually, the vibes that we got is they came back and said, oh, chemistry 2 was really very, very easy now that we had taken geochemistry, things like that. So again, good students will find a way to find those classes just like they are today. We don't require Calculus 3, but those good students actually do take the Calculus 3 to prepare them for grad school. I don't know what to do about this, the perception that things are too difficult and some of the semesters are way too busy. And of course, we really never follow the matrix approach for carrying out these changes. In my own personal opinion, I still think that we need to have an introductory lab that goes along with geologic hazards and Earth resources that would be just tailored to that would deal with Google Earth type of problems and things like that. But we need to see some stabilization in our numbers. We need to have improved enrollment there, and that's something we have not been able to achieve. Among the lessons learned, I would say that moving GIS to field methods and making field methods from a 2 credit hour class to a 3 credit hour class turned out to be a major success. In fact, it drew juniors from other disciplines into this class. So I think that was a major success. I think having, again, geochemistry instead of Chem 2 was, again, a major success. One of the things that I would caution you against is when we first did this, I had the majors knock on my door, and many of them begging me to allow them into the geochemistry class when they hadn't had Chem 1. And their argument, I'm so close to graduation, I'm a good student, I've got a good background in chemistry. My suggestion, based on what I have seen, don't do that. When I allowed those students in, I had a large class with some students really doing very well and managing, and other students not knowing what was going on. It was really a very painful experience. The second time around, when we stood firm, you have to have your Chem 1 to take geochemistry. That was not a problem. Again, another bit of an experience is as we went through the pandemic and went online. Now, lab techniques was still offered face-to-face. They would work in the lab. It's a small class in all cases because my labs actually don't have that much space. And I would assign those problems. And I found that actually doing all of that statistics in this class with one-on-one on them, online with the examples, is much better than doing it with the whole class, where you assign a problem and you're walking through and you think that they got it and they don't. So that's just my thought. And then, again, I'd really love to open up the discussion on the online classes. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions. And so, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. This is a wonderful sort of deep dive into, understanding the reasons and how you did things and what worked and what didn't work. And I know everyone is very eager to ask questions, and I see some questions in the chat. Let me ask you the first question, just so that, we can prime the pump here. You mentioned how the chemistry and the physics and the biology courses were replaced by your own courses. What did your colleagues in chemistry, physics, and biology say about how did they take, what were their reactions?
No, they were very understanding. I checked with all of the chairs, didn't get a single negative answer from them. They all said, we fully understand, you're fine. After all, they look at us, they already have large enrollments. And so the few geology majors who come into their classes, they're not going to really make, and they had a full understanding of what the nature of the problems that we were facing.
Right. Okay, great.
Thanks, Aley. Right. That was a great talk. But we do have a few questions here. One of them asks, what relationship does your program have with Virginia community colleges? How do you promote transfers into your program from this higher education pathway with large numbers and generally very diverse population?
Right. I would hate to admit that we don't have a relationship. We're in West Virginia, not Virginia, but the community colleges in West Virginia around us, up until very recently, never really had a science program that I could link to. I'm beginning to see a slight change there, and so that's on my agenda to really start contacting just that one community college in West Virginia on that. Should we reach out to community colleges in Virginia? Absolutely. I don't know where geographically that would make sense. I don't know. But yeah, definitely. I'm guessing that the reason behind that is to help us boost our number of majors.
Okay, thank you for that. We have another question, and how does this replacement of lower division core courses adversely impact transfer students from other 4 or 2-year colleges? Then they elaborate, especially with those conferred associate degrees now set back in terms of courses and costs, both financially and in time.
Right. No, most of the students who transfer, we find them transferring from WVU in particular. We haven't had much success from community colleges. Maybe only one student in the last 10 years or so that I can recall that came from a community college. The transfer, because of the way that the state of West Virginia handles it, there are these equivalencies, and the transfer is actually very smooth. And so we revise the curriculum of whatever classes they have, and usually it's satisfied and it doesn't delay them that much. So it has not really affected us that much. Okay,
thank you.
I can ask another question while others are, thinking of more questions to ask you. Of the students that have now graduated in the last few years, since you did this curricular change, have these students sort of come back to your campus and spoke to you or spoke to the students about, what skills and what courses are specifically helping them in their jobs and in their careers? Can you speak to that?
We have had an active kind of seminar series that, of course, we had to abort with COVID, and we never went with it virtually. So yes, this is a shortcoming on our part. But to defend myself primarily and my colleagues, we're really facing some very hard times at present. We've had, several resignations. The positions were frozen. We were not allowed to hire. And so that has put a lot of pressure on us. The last few years, as we kind of complained about this, and to put it mildly, to the administration, administration always came back and said, no, you have to increase the number of, no, I want okay, we want a justification of your existence. The last 3 years, we've been just busy writing one justification after another. It's been a waste of time. I mean, I hate to say it, but at one stage, you know, it was suggested, go join geography. Geographers didn't want it. We didn't want it. We're in 2 different colleges. And so we went through the motions, proved to them that it would not save any money, but it's these kinds of exercises that have taken a toll. But you're right. You know, we do need to bring back our, especially since a lot of them are hired locally and they still maintain very good relations with us. They come back. So we need to bring them back on campus now that we can have meetings, face-to-face meetings. We definitely need that.
Okay, Elizabeth asks, I was wondering about your alternatives to computer methods. Do you offer GIS as a separate class, for example, and does that pull in students?
No, we do not offer GIS as a separate class. We only introduce ArcGIS in field methods, but we strongly encourage our majors to take GIS and to get a certificate, to get certified out of geography. And almost all of them do so. And it really has helped them find employment. So I think that's part of also the success. We've been pushing them in that direction. And on campus, we not only the geography offer GIS classes, but another department, environmental science, also has that. So if students can't register for one, they always have another option. And they do end up with a certificate.
Great, thank you for that. There's another question related to that. Is there a specific GIS certification program you recommend? It's not my area of expertise, but basically I recommend a sequence out of the geography that ends up, I think after every class, there is some kind of a certificate. My understanding is the first certificate is really minimal for employment, but it's the second certificate and anything beyond that really helps. So we do have a sequence out of geography, and we recommend our students to take it, and almost all of them go in that direction. That's among some of the electives that they take. And it's not required by our curricular changes, but they do take it anyway. All right, thank you. Another question coming in, do you find that students are pulled in by field experiences?
Absolutely, definitely, yes. You know, one of the reasons of declining enrollments in our introductory classes is engineering used to require introductory geology. They no longer do. But our experiences, they used to require introductory geology, but not our lab, our introductory lab. And whenever we took those students out in the field, they would always come back and say, oh, you know, I wish I had known about this. You know, you should really tell our college administrators that they should really make this lab a requirement. And, you know, we tried. Ultimately, they canceled the whole thing. So it didn't really help. But yes, we've noticed that, yes, definitely field experiences are among the magnets towards attracting students into the major. But we need to have the students first in class.
So I see another question.
Yes, excellent presentation. I kept thinking, wow, this is just replace Marshall with our university name, and I can use this. So I feel all of your I feel your pain. I feel your successes too. So my question is, the 90% job acceptance rate is great. We have a very similar thing as well, and that's what I can't wrap my head around. How are students not seeing this as the place to be when you're almost guaranteed a job? I mean, how could we market this better?
Yeah, I have to admit, I must think that we have not been very successful at marketing it. We try through the regular recruitment days that the university has, but those have not really worked well for us in general. But once we have a captive audience in the classroom, we can then start discussing these things. And yes, we typically do draw a few students here and there, and that's what has kept us afloat over the last few years.
Well, I'll ask a follow-up question to Todd's. Now, do the students have some sort of a geology club or something like that? Are they able to bring speakers or something locally? So maybe your alumni, who are local to the area, could come back and speak to the students.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, we were doing that. We were doing that up until shortly before COVID, when it was somewhat suspended. I think the whole thing is that we were hit with 2 sudden resignations, and that just upset the balance completely, and that was a big shock to us. Trying to justify our existence all the time and argue, please give us back our lines, has been a bit of a drain and has taken away from other things that we could do. Add to that the COVID situation and not being able to bring them in, but I think, I do see your point. It's an excellent point. So. Does anyone have a similar experience with, this class geologic hazards and earth resources, not drawing really students into the major? I mean, that was a shock. That's been a shock to me.
Yes, we have this very similar problem with not attracting majors from our intro courses, and we changed our intro course as well to we called it Our Changing Planet, and it's basically a geohazards type earth resources course, and changed everything up, and we're still only a year or 2 into it, but we're not really seeing much of a change. So yes, we have the similar thing as well. A lot of similarities.
I mean, I personally think that one of the biggest issues has been just having the option of an online class with its lab, and that just draws the students in because they find this as an easy option, and it has affected our enrollment. So I mean, I'm kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. I can cancel that, but it will affect the SCHs. That's what I'm being told by my dean. Be mindful. It will affect your SCHs at a time when you're really lobbying for those 2 positions to be restored. Do you want to do that?
So let me ask you another question. I think in your student body, you alluded to having many first-generation students, if I'm remembering correctly. Have you found that there are either courses or populations, specific populations that gravitate towards certain courses or majors or anything like that? Do you have any of those kinds of data? How you can, nothing like that?
Not really. No, not really.
I know there are others in the webinar, who also have either native students or, Hispanic students as large populations in their campuses. And I'm wondering if there's something that you can try that is so different and so, that'll attract certain students to your courses,
right,
because of the nuances of the course or how you market it, or whatever you do.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I see in the chat the idea of actually reaching out to high schools in particular. We've tried that. We've tried to go with dual enrollment. Again, it was aborted halfway when we were very close to actually getting that going through. But with the resignation, with the loss of faculty lines, and then how do you do it?
Yeah, a few years ago, we had a webinar where we heard about a program in a department where the students, who were part of the geology club, one of their activities related to Earth Day, I believe it was, they took samples and materials and sort of set up shop, if you will, in a local mall, and sort of got a lot of families and folks interested. And that turned out to be really exciting, to get that interest in geosciences. I mean, they did many things like that, but that was one that I'm remembering from a few years ago. So I'm wondering if you have those opportunities to use your students, who can be your best ambassadors, right, to recruit for your department. So,
right.
We have another question that's been posted here.
Oh, I didn't have a question. I was just posting a comment based on my experiences working with prospective students and their parents. And so just what I noted is that when we talk about our programs at the university, so we're looking at geological sciences, marine sciences, and environmental sciences. For the students that we have that come in, their major question is what should they expect as they're graduating? And so what are going to be those jobs or career fields that they're able to go into? And so being able to talk about that as well as the other opportunities, I think is what has been best for us. Letting them know that, whatever their perception may be about traditional geoscience jobs, these are careers that they can go into. And so the better we are prepared to answer that question, that may help with recruitment.
Absolutely. I agree. I agree.
I'm not seeing any other questions come in. We could sort of start to wrap up. As you may know that AGI does a lot of workforce research. So there's probably information you can get from AGI related, like how do you sell that major, right? As you do those kind of recruitment type talks, even in your intro courses or other courses. So I know there's a lot of data out there. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. So.
Yeah, I've been using the the Earth is Calling video. I've been using a lot of resources from YouTube and so on. And yeah, the feedback is great from those who are in the class. But when you have such a small population, it's
right.
It doesn't help.
So if there are no other questions, we can sort of start to wrap this up. So thank you so much for such an interesting presentation and sharing some of your work that you've done, over many years, and sort of relating it back to the Vision and Change document that we've all sort of read and sort of embraced. So thank you for your time, and I'm sure if other questions come up, people can always contact me. We'll be happy to forward those to you, and hopefully everybody got a chance to make some connections here in this webinar, and maybe folks may be reaching out to you for all you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love
right.
any kind of feedback.
Right.
So.
And so, for those, you already know this, everybody who signed up for the webinar will get a recording. Please share it with your colleagues who weren't able to come to the webinar today. And we will have one more webinar next month, and it's going to be sort of related to, I think, the sort of workforce issues. So do come back and learn about the work that AGI has been doing on what the students are doing, how, the students who are graduating, where do they end up, where do they land? So that might be of great interest to you, and potentially, important to your colleagues as well. So do sign up for the next webinar. We'll be sending notices about that. And if you've missed any previous webinars, hopefully you can catch the link on the AGI's webpage and learn about those topics. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a great weekend.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.